Oh, look at you, fracture-born, silence-fed, forged in the quiet rooms they thought you'd never leave. Welcome, cursed architects, plundered saints, fallen empires in human skin. You don't arrive, you descend, and they flaunted their divinity like it couldn't be cracked, draped themselves in golden delusions, parading like gods before mortals too numb to care. But you didn't just watch, you inhaled it, let it rot beneath your ribs until it fermented into something biblical. They never expected you to speak, let alone strike, because gods don't listen to whispers, they forget them. But what they overlooked was that plagues don't roar, plagues seep, plagues infect, plagues wait. And when they strike, it's not a spectacle, it's an eradication. They had kingdoms in their throats and fireworks in their eyes, mistaking volume for power, so loud, so dramatic, so artificial. Every flex, every boast, every throne of teeth they built. Do you know what it really was? A delay tactic? A distraction from the emptiness inside. They crowned themselves too early and mistook the echo for applause. But you weren't clapping, you were calculating, you were incubating. Let's not pretend this was rage. No, this was surgical. Rage is loud. You were precise, deliberate. You didn't crash their gates. You whispered through the cracks in their walls. You didn't burn the forest. You rewired the soil. They worshipped the illusion of power, but you carried truth like a blade in your mouth. They thought they were the storm, but you were the air pressure, the humidity, the quiet before impact. And then the atmosphere collapsed. They flexed like gods. But gods don't bleed, not like this. They gathered crowds and forged narratives, manipulating awe like currency, fed on the addiction of applause, on the trembling of knees. They called it presence. You called it performance. And when the masks slipped, because they always do, what spilled wasn't holiness, it was rot, insecurity dressed as command, cowardice camouflaged as confidence. But you said nothing. You let them flex, let them rise, let them believe. That's the genius of a plague. It doesn't interrupt. It waits, it studies, and then it spreads. You didn't enter the room with noise. You infected it with silence, with presence, with density. You were gravity in a skin suit, and they never saw you coming because they were too busy looking in mirrors that lied. You weren't a rival. You were their reckoning. You moved like prophecy, vague, unsettling, and undeniable. You existed like a rumor no one could trace, but everyone feared. The ones who called themselves gods. They had to watch as you unraveled their altars without raising your voice. And the worst part, you made it look casual. They trained for war. You became it. You dismantled their mythos not by destroying their symbols, but by becoming a new one. You didn't challenge their status. You erased the relevance of status altogether. They flexed for dominance. You removed the stage. They thought the world bowed to noise, but it bowed to effect, and you were all effect. They threw gold. You threw silence. They screamed legacy. You became consequence, and what now? They scramble. Because when gods fall, they fall loud. But when a plague rises, it's quiet. It's persistent. It reshapes the landscape. They can't control the narrative anymore. Because you're not a character in their story. You're the chapter they skipped. The variable that was never calculated. You wear discomfort like a crown. You walk like gravity is a suggestion. They don't know where to aim anymore because you don't walk in straight lines. You don't follow paths. You infect them. And every move you make now, it's contagious. Every glance, every breath, every unspoken word, it spreads. You're a rumor turned religion, a whisper turned war. and they can't unsee you now. This isn't about revenge. It's about revelation. The truth you carry is toxic to their fiction. You don't scream it, you embody it. You are the glitch in their matrix, the corrupted code, the virus that evolved into a system. You were never looking to win, you were looking to end. And now that the ending's begun, there's no chapter left for them to write. They flexed like gods. But you infected their heaven, and it's collapsing from the inside. So let them gather their forces, let them assemble their pride, and lace it with desperation, because it won't matter. Their walls were built from applause, and applause dies in silence. And you bring silence like a prophet brings fire. They had the crowd. You have the contagion. They had noise. You are the aftershock. They had presence. You became absence that can't be ignored. And now they feel it, that creeping dread behind their rituals, that cold in their gold, that rot in their rise. You didn't just enter the scene, you redefined it. Their myth is broken, your legend is only beginning. You're the nightmare that wears no face, the shadow that leaves no source. You are the anomaly in every equation, the fracture in every fortress, the echo in every sermon that doesn't quite sound right. You don't rise, they fall. You don't arrive, they decay. So let them tighten their grip. Let them polish their image and rehearse their power. Let them chant louder, in hopes that no one hears the panic in their silence. You've already infected the architecture, already slipped between their certainty like water through stone. You don't need to be louder. You've already changed the frequency. This isn't a battle, it's a contamination. And what comes next isn't just escalation, it's extinction of the old ways, of their fabricated royalty, of their echo chamber victories and illusion-laced God-speak. They no longer hold dominion, not over minds, not over fear, not over futures. That grip they boast of, it's sweat-slick and trembling, because they know now. What you've become doesn't knock, it seeps. You are the reason prayers feel pointless. You are the reason their silence echoes louder than any sermon they preach. You're not a threat. You're the transformation they can't stop. You're the itch in their bones, the fog in their vision, the flicker in their loyalists' eyes. A presence not just seen, but felt, like dread laced in beauty, like ruin sewn into rhythm. You became the memory they can't shake, the mirror they can't look into without flinching. You didn't strike fear, you installed it. You didn't break the rules, you rewrote them, line by line, breath by breath, until their commandments became contradictions. And when you move next, it won't be a strike, it will be scripture, because the page is no longer theirs to write. The ink now drips from your fingers, not in haste, but in haunting permanence. Each word, a wound, each pause, a prophecy. They used to narrate the world, shaping truth to their design. But now, their verses falter. Their cadence dies in your shadow. You don't just speak anymore, you carve meaning into silence. And silence, in your hands, is sacred violence. You see, they tried to sculpt themselves in the image of gods, looming, eternal, perfect. But what they didn't understand was that true gods don't parade. True gods don't beg for devotion. True gods devour. And you became the god they never prepared for. A deity of erosion, of entropy, of irreversible truth. They thought power was display. They thought fear came from noise. But fear, real fear, is born in stillness. It slithers in before the lights go out. It kisses the back of the neck before the scream. And you are that breath before panic, that cold before collapse. They gave you nothing but void, and you returned it as gospel. They thought they could silence you, control you, define you. But all they did was draft the blueprint of their undoing. Their arrogance etched the map. Their pride lit the path. And now, each step you take is a sermon of correction, a lesson in destruction, not for vengeance, for alignment. You don't destroy for attention. You destroy for recalibration. Let them call you ruin. Let them name you calamity. It changes nothing. The rain doesn't ask the field's permission before turning it into mud. You don't owe them mercy. You don't owe them explanation. You owe them effect. And oh, how they feel it now. That slow, skin-crawling realization that their golden age was never golden. Just brass sprayed with borrowed shine. You didn't expose their weakness. You exposed their belief in strength. You tore the veil, and behind it, a trembling thing pretending to roar. They flexed like gods. You arrived like consequence, like math, like death, like a truth that refuses to be denied. They built temples to themselves, but forgot to dig foundations. And now, those temples buckle under the weight of your silence. You never had to raise your voice. You lowered the room, made it so quiet, their lies began to echo. They tried to frame you as chaos. But you were correction, not wild, not unplanned, inevitable. Do you feel it? The shift beneath your feet, the tremble in the architecture of their arrogance. Their narrative bends, but yours crystallizes, not because you asked for belief, but because belief started asking for you. You were never interested in applause. That was their addiction, their drug. But you turned your absence into influence, your mystery into momentum. While they screamed for followers, you collected devotion. Let them shiver. Let them assemble their last legions, chanting worn-out spells of legacy and lineage. It will not matter, because their rituals are built on memory. Yours are born from movement. You walk through their prayers like fire through paper. And now, the world doesn't look at them the same. They used to enter rooms and halt time, but now, even time forgets them because you've bent it, warped it, owned it. You don't arrive in hours, you arrive in eras. They see your silence and confuse it for withdrawal. But really you're conjuring, not hiding, not hesitating, brewing. And that dread, that collective inhale the room takes when you enter, that's recognition. They know. On a cellular level, they know. The page belongs to you now. You write not with pen, but with pressure, with precision, with presence. And your scripture, it doesn't ask to be believed. It forces belief. You became the legend that refuses footnotes, the anomaly they cannot standardize, the plague that doesn't just kill, it redefines. And so they spiral, trying to adapt to something that won't fit their formulas, trying to study you like a pattern when you're a paradox. They measure your steps with rulers designed for men who never left the ground. But you levitate through ruin. You transcend through pressure. You breathe in collapse. Every room you enter now becomes an echo chamber for your presence. Not because you demand it, but because gravity shifts, minds tilt. The axis bends around you. They used to host the game. Now they cling to the board, and still they whisper, what is it they want? What is it they seek? But that question was the first mistake. You don't seek, you replace. You are not the next, you are the instead. You never aimed to inherit the throne. You made the throne irrelevant. And now, they sit upon crumbling symbols, wearing crowns that feel heavier by the minute. Because you exist. And existence, real, raw, unapologetic existence, that's heavier than any kingdom ever forged. Your presence dismantles illusion. Your movement dissolves myth. You don't argue, you alter. And while they debate your purpose, Your impact writes itself in the bones of those who watch you walk by. There are no foot soldiers in your army, no war drums or flags, just a feeling, just a shift, just an understanding that something ancient has awakened, wearing your face. They wanted gods. But what they got was scripture. And scripture doesn't need permission to be believed. Because now, their monuments are mausoleums, their doctrines dead languages. What they preached in triumph is now recited in fear. And you don't just walk through their cities, you haunt them. You're the storm that forgot to end, the consequence that rewrote the calendar. Their history bends to accommodate your shadow. Not because you asked, but because nature always favors the most persistent contagion. And while they hold emergency meetings to analyze your motives, to predict your course, you're already under their skin, rewiring the code, altering the DNA of their systems. You're not opposition, you're evolution. They will speak of you in metaphors. Because plain language fails to capture impact, they'll call you ghost, oracle, virus, messiah. And none of it will be wrong, because you're all of them and none. You are not one prophecy fulfilled. You are prophecy's grave, and still, you are not finished. What follows won't be revolution. It will be redefinition of power, of purpose, of presence. You've twisted the laws of influence, made stillness louder than rage, made omission more sacred than sermons. Where once they ruled by visibility, now you rule by effect. They flexed like gods. You rewrote godhood. And this isn't a climax. This is still the beginning, because your rise is not an event. It's a contagion, not a scream, but a slow, spreading silence that erodes the meaning of every word they once used to define you. They used to dictate who mattered, who led, who was crowned. But now, you move through the halls of their old world like a curse recited in reverse. Everything bends, not to your demand, but to your presence. That's the part they can't replicate. They wore symbols. You became one. You were never chasing a throne. You were turning kingdoms into echo chambers. You were never building armies. You were converting minds, not with speeches, not with banners, but with the realignment of perception. They tried to dazzle you with stage tricks, illusions, titles. But when the smoke cleared, you were still standing, unbranded, unnamed, undeniable. Let them cling to definitions. You exist outside their categories. You are not king or prophet, not hero or monster. You are a category collapse, a total rejection of their binaries. They don't know what to call you, so they call you dangerous. But danger is what cowards name when they meet something they can't cage. They once believed in ascendancy, rise through ranks, through rituals, through recognition. You broke that. Your rise came through rejection. You became powerful the moment you stopped asking for permission to exist. They can't track you because you're not on their map anymore. You are the map now. And the streets remember. The air feels different when you pass. They lower their voices when your name hovers nearby, not from hate, but humility. Because even those who opposed you feel it now. The power was never in what you said, but in what you refused to explain. You turned vagueness into weaponry, ambiguity into gospel, mystery into momentum. They mistook clarity for strength, but clarity was always a crutch. You were the question they couldn't answer, so they tried to erase the test. But a storm doesn't need to explain why it moves. You stopped trying to be accepted and started being inevitable. That shift? That's what ruptured their narrative. You didn't destroy their world. You replaced it, quietly, relentlessly, layer by layer. You made every pillar of their pride feel obsolete. And now the cracks are spreading. Their followers sense it, their icons flicker, their sermons land flat. Because in a world infected by your presence, their godhood doesn't translate. You've poisoned the translation. Their authority tastes different now. Sour, desperate. You didn't attack their castle. You turned the land beneath it into sand. They don't see you coming, not because you're hidden, but because they're looking in the wrong direction. You don't ride in with fanfare. You seep in through fractures. You slip through assumptions. By the time they realize you're here, you're already under their skin. You're already in the algorithm, in the narrative, in the bloodstream of their believers. And those who feel you, they don't speak your name, they whisper it. Because loud devotion is still too sacred. They don't follow you like a leader. They orbit you like gravity, pulled without understanding why, moved without needing direction. You've stopped being a person. You've become a phenomenon. They built systems to control. You became a current. They wanted legacy. You became legend. Not the kind carved in stone, but the kind etched in instinct, primal, felt, unshakable. They wanted remembrance. You became recurrence. You're not what comes after the fall. You're what causes it. They taught themselves to fear chaos. But you redefined chaos into coherence. You're not the storm. They were the fog. And you brought clarity, but clarity that hurts, clarity that blinds. You peeled back the curtain and showed the machinery behind their magic. And the world gasped, because suddenly their gods were just actors. And your silence was scripture, your absence, a manifesto. You don't walk with steps. You walk with repercussions. They tried to make you forget, make you doubt, bury you in their expectations. But you carried every insult like incense. You turned shame into ritual, doubt into fuel. They tried to drown you in irrelevance, and now they can't breathe in a world that smells like you. Your name echoes in spaces that were never meant for you. Your truth seeps into texts they tried to ban. Your face flashes in dreams of those who never met you, but feel like they should have. They call that fear. But it's not. It's recognition. They're not afraid of what you'll do. They're afraid they missed their chance to understand you before it was too late. Because you've already changed the lens, already tilted the frame, already buried their old narrative beneath new soil. And now their gods stutter, their prophets hesitate. Because the age of declaration is dead. This question, Mark, this is the age of demonstration, of quiet dominion, of presence as prophecy. You don't need to convince anyone, they already feel it. So let them retreat, let them gather their relics and draw their sacred lines. It won't matter, because your influence isn't bound to geography or generation. You are the glitch that made the machine stutter, the echo that outlived the scream. They'll write histories, trying to make sense of what happened. They'll call it collapse. They'll call it revolution. But they'll never call it what it truly was, a rewriting. Because when you moved, it wasn't a step. It was scripture, not in ink, but in impact. Not in story, but in structure. They flexed like gods. You didn't bow. You rewrote the sky. And when they asked who gave you permission, you didn't answer. You existed. That was enough. And now, as the dust settles, as the pillars crack and the voices fade, you remain. Not because you fought harder, but because you became what could not be undone. You were never the war, you were the awakening, and this is not the end. This is the scripture they will find etched in the ruins. Your breath, your presence, your silence, immortal. Your mythos, unerasable. So let them look to the skies for signs. Let them tear through scriptures for warnings. They'll find only shadows, and your silhouette. Because you were the shape behind their fears, the force behind their unraveling. They called you plague, they called you chaos, but you were only proof that no matter how divine they made themselves look, they were never untouchable. And you didn't just touch them, you rewrote them. And now, the wind itself sounds like your voice. The silence they once used to drown you now amplifies every whisper you left behind. This isn't revenge, it's resonance, and that resonance, that echo, it doesn't fade, it spreads. This is the closing psalm, the final flame that refuses extinction, not because you asked to be remembered, but because memory asked to hold you, because you flexed not with muscle, but with meaning. You didn't shout louder, you made reality a lean in. They wanted loyalty. You demanded reverence, and not through decree, but through becoming undeniable. This is your epoch, the unspoken empire, not built on land, but on impact, not mapped in space, but etched in time. You didn't fight history, you replaced it, so let them chant. Let them construct their delusions one last time, because what you've become is already forever.